Hello and welcome to the special live stream. I'm Kashif Shahzada, your host for today. Assalamu alaikum to all the listeners and viewers. Today I have a special guest in the studio, somebody who has featured on my YouTube channel quite often. And for a change, today I'm going to be asking her questions rather than her asking me questions as she has done in the past. It is Miss Claire Khaw, who is joining me live from London. Claire Khaw is a political commentator, blogger. She has interests in politics and she has a very interesting background. She is no stranger to controversy. She has landed herself in a bit of a quandary often at times, and I'd like her to explain her position herself. So, Claire Khaw, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I have gotten myself into awkward positions at times, and I hope I will be able to explain them to your satisfaction and the satisfaction of your subscribers.
Okay, Claire, you've been blogging since more than a decade. If I recall correctly, we were in touch with each other way back in 2008, something like that. And since then, you have consistently written and consistently participated in discussion and debate on a wide variety of issues. May I know what is your background? Were you born in a religious household? Was religion an influence in your family? And, what led you into political discourse?
Well, my family background is Buddhist and Taoist, and from childhood, I just have this memory of going to my grandfather's house on Sundays and listening to my relations discuss politics. I didn't know what it was all about, but that was what I remembered. I don't remember taking much of an interest at the time. So my interest in politics came when I was older. And I suppose I was always a little interested when I heard my father discuss politics with his associates, and I suppose I thought I knew the answer. I suppose that was kind of why got me interested into the subject, and I would think, oh, but the solution must be this, mustn't it? I mean, there's no, and this is kind of what got me going, and I've been making these arguments as I saw them, and I guess I never stopped. I'm still going.
Right. I understand that you are from a Chinese Malaysian background.
That's right.
Did any of the politics of Malaysia, there is friction between the ethnic Chinese and the ethnic Malays, did any of that political discourse feature as a conversation in your household?
Not really. I mean, my memory of my childhood in Malaysia was that it was peaceful and people got along. I know that in my parents' time there were curfews and race riots, but it was not something that I personally experienced. So I really can't say that I experienced any racial difficulties in my childhood as I was growing up in Malaysia. So other people might have felt it, but I don't feel that I was badly treated. Although there were people who complained about, quotas for indigenous Bumiputras, indigenous Malays, and it is a multicultural, multiracial society, so there's bound to be friction. But actually, Malaysia is an ethno-nationalist country in that Malays do have racial privileges over other races.
Right. And so you were brought up in Malaysia. Were you born in Malaysia?
Yes.
Okay. And moving on to Britain, I understand that Malaysia was under British rule and they had independence in 1949. Moving on to Britain, Did you experience any problems with the native British, you being of Chinese Malaysian descent? Did you encounter any difficulties there?
Well, it wasn't something, um, sometimes people would say things about, your, but it wasn't something that I thought was, so overpoweringly, terrible. People might make a few offhand comments about my origins and my race, but I guess I think all people have done this about other people, so I didn't think it was something for me to think terrible things about them. Because people always might say the odd thing that might be offensive to a foreigner. And I
So,
had heard.
okay. So growing up in Britain, presumably you were educated in a British school,
Yes,
and you
I came to school in the UK in my teens, so
right.
that was when it started.
And did you take part in politics at university? Were you a member of the students' union or something like that?
Um, I think I was known. I was a mature student, so I didn't do the usual student politics thing. But I think a lot of people were aware of my views because I suppose innocently would just say exactly what I thought, and everybody would be horrified. And so that was kind of the thing. And I thought, well, why? I mean, if you're going to say I'm wrong, please make arguments rather than call me names. These are, what I thought were quite reasonable questions and points I was making. It wasn't as if it was untrue or illogical. They just got offended for some reason.
Like looking at your background, I understand you also had an interest in the arts. Did you want to be a comedian? Is it correct that you wanted to be a stand-up comedian at some point in time? Did you have such an aspiration?
Well, this was a kind of, I guess, a middle-aged thing. I did do a comedy course because I saw that it was available, and I didn't, it was a new thing, and it sounded fun, and it sounded less frightening than skydiving. People have these sort of little ideas about what they'd like to do that they haven't so far done, and I thought doing a comedy course would be quite interesting and character building, in that I was afraid of public speaking, and that course got me over my fear of public speaking. Because
So
it was done in a very concentrated way. You have to stand up for 5 minutes and
yes,
perform.
reading your blog, it gives me the impression that your tone is always witty. There is an element of wit and irony and sarcasm in it. Do you merge politics with a bit of comedy? Is that your genre? Is that your genre of writing?
Well, I don't know. It just sort of came about that was how I wished to express myself, and I suppose that came to be. It just cemented, I suppose. I mean, I must have got my way of writing from probably from other English writers. So I guess my way of writing would come from a combination of different sources.
Right. So, what was your experience with journalism? I understand that you had a stint as a journalist, a brief stint. Would you like to elaborate on that?
I don't remember. I wrote a few reviews for a few two book reviews, really. So I'm not quite sure what you mean about being a journalist.
I'm sorry. Did you have aspirations to go into broadcasting as a talk show host or something like that?
Oh, that's my thing. I mean, I still hope to be a chat show hostess or on TV. I mean, I'm probably too fat for it, but a radio talk show would be fun. And I suppose my YouTube channel gives me the kind of thing that I want to do,
Right. Okay.
which is
So
talking to people and making it entertaining for others to listen to, and
Now,
maybe educational.
in your writings, you lean obviously very much towards the right, and some might argue towards the far right. What brought you into that? Because conventionally, people who are ethnic minorities in Britain, they do not pursue far right politics. If you are a British Asian or a British Muslim, then mostly the case is that they would go towards the center of the left. But in you, there is this uniqueness that your discourse is heavily leaning towards the right wing, and you have also aspired to join political parties that are ultra conservative, like the BNP or the Tories. So, what led you to choose that path as an ethnic minority living in Britain?
Well, I suppose it was more that I was trying to understand why the views that were expressed by my family could not be expressed by white working class people in the West.
And what were those views?
Um, to express concern about immigration, I think anybody would be un- dis- discomforted by um, a lot of new arrivals all of a sudden, and then suddenly prevented from complaining about it. In fact, I did actually speak to a Muslim woman, and she told me that this was after London was um, what's the word? I mean, counted to be a majority non-white city. And we were discussing that, and she was saying that she, as a Muslim, was actually a little embarrassed about it. So I think people, feel a certain, well, are you sure? When people are being, very generous, you think, do I deserve it? And that sort of thing. And I remember when I first arrived in from at Heathrow, and I went into the West End. I looked around. It was West London, Hounslow, and places like that. And I thought, well, there's certainly it's a very high immigration place, and I just wondered, if the people minded. So this was something that puzzled me. And then, of course, as I got older, I noticed that a lot of people did mind, and I was a little curious as to why, being a democracy, they couldn't stop the situation. So that was really how I guess what I'm trying to say is that I tried to investigate the problem. To find out why that immigration was something that kept happening and happening, and people complained and complained, but they couldn't do anything about it, and then Trump got voted in. So it was obviously a decade, well, a very long process.
Don't you see a contradiction between what you are espousing or supporting politically, which is an end to immigration? Presumably, you are doing that, and your own life journey. Your family, they migrated from Malaysia to the UK. They had a life in the UK. So you came as an immigrant yourself. So the question is being asked that how come you would now uh, support a position which is against immigration?
Well, I'm not. My parents aren't, in the UK. I'm the only one in the UK. Uh, I, um, I guess I wasn't really thinking about myself. I was thinking, I was looking at it from the point of view of a problem. I was wondering why these people who obviously didn't like immigration couldn't object to it. And that was really, the focus of my investigation. Why, in this wonderful democracy, the working classes were basically being ignored and marginalized for complaining about something that I imagined if I were them living in their country, I would be complaining about too.
Okay, so what led you? Why were you looking to join the BNP, and what led to your expulsion?
I didn't actually join. I wasn't asking to join. In fact, they invited me to join because they were in trouble with the Equalities and Human Rights Commission for apparently not being friendly enough to non-white people. So they were saying the BNP was being racially discriminatory, and I thought, I thought it was a bit crazy because they do need to be racially discriminatory, but there was the Equalities and Human Rights Commission saying you can't be racially discriminatory, you've got to have these non-white people in. But so because that they knew about me because I was hanging around in the same Eurosceptic groups, they thought I was okay, so they invited me to join. I knew it was a tokenism, really. So I felt I couldn't refuse, and so I joined. But may I just mention to you that there was, before I even joined, there was already a Sikh member. And I know that the Sikh member had a problem with Muslims. So, I'm just saying that sometimes even other non-white people in the UK think that, we've had enough. There are too many other foreigners coming in. It's got to stop. So that I thought was quite interesting.
Now, Britain is a multiracial society. It's a multi-faith, multi-ethnic society. There is a political division as well. Do you think that Britain, the way it is going to remain as one country, or do you foresee Scotland going its way, England going its way, the Irish having Ireland, and the Welsh having Wales as an independent country?
Well, it's very difficult to say. Obviously, Britain would be weakened if Scotland became independent, if it had to give up Northern Ireland. But this is the problem, I think, of Britain. It's getting weaker and weaker. It's not doing the obvious things I think it should do to solve its problems. It's sweeping them under the carpet. It's ignoring them. It's demonizing people who complain. And I think that there are big problems that are not being addressed and not being discussed at all.
But when we see countries like the United States and to some extent Britain as well, they aren't having a total ban on immigration. In fact, when you open your borders up, people also bring in capital. If I'm emigrating from, say, Pakistan and I want to live in the UK, then naturally I will sell my house in Pakistan, bring that capital into the country and buy a house in the United Kingdom. So immigrants also bring in capital inflows. So how come immigration is that bad? How come it's become such a negative word in the circle that you move around?
Well, this is basically a class thing. So the British government basically brought in cheaper, more plentiful immigrant labour to basically replace the white working classes without, even warning them. I mean, they could have warned them that look, you have to work harder, you have to, make sure that you're properly trained for your vocations. They're not even warned, before the hammer fell. So I guess they were never told. And I also noticed that their political leaders in their anti-immigration parties don't even talk about education and things like that. They basically say, well, blame the Muslims, blame the Jews. And it is this dishonesty that is still happening even now. They don't think it is their fault at all. I mean, I merely got into I merely investigated the problem.
But if immigration were such a bad thing, then obviously there's a shortage of skilled labor. The NHS has got a shortage of nurses. There is a shortage of doctors, and a lot of these positions are filled by immigrants. The British Army, with whom I've had the pleasure of working as a consultant, is largely composed of people who are not native white. There is a large element of recruitment from the Commonwealth. So if you were to ban immigration in all, then who will run the country? Who will run the armed forces? Who will run the health service?
Well, I don't actually favour a complete end to immigration. I'm just saying we should investigate the problem of why immigration is something that certain people are not allowed to complain about without being demonized, i.e. the working classes, and why it has never been explained to them what has happened. It's like, you're not good enough. You can't, you're not well trained enough. I also know that commercial bodies such as the Institute of Directors at the Confederation of British Industry, they were practically begging the government to improve standards of education, saying that school leavers couldn't even, count or write or read, and this was just completely ignored. So I guess we have to accept that the white indigenous people have a very bad education. They are unfit for work. Nobody will admit that that's a problem. So the quickest way is to just import people to do the work that these people are no longer fit to do.
Now, Britain has signed the Brexit agreement, and we are looking at things post Brexit. We are looking at a scenario. But do you think it was wise, given that the EU did a lot of business with the British? A sizable proportion of food imports are from the European Union, and there was a lot of investment from Europe in many industries in the UK. And now the situation is a bit uncertain, and we are also reading in the headlines that probably Britain is going to break international law and not have an agreement at all. So where do you see the country in a post Brexit scenario economically? And mind you, a lot of British small businesses do not engage in export. Their industry, they are not doing trade, they're not bringing in foreign exchange. So if Britain is out of the EU with all without an agreement, or wouldn't that bring in an economic turmoil in the country?
Well, it seems that there will be economic turmoil anyway. The point is that we know who wants the world to be run along these trading blocks. We know the last time before the vote, the EU referendum, that Obama warned the British that they would go to the end of the queue as regards a trade deal with America. And now we have Nancy Pelosi saying Britain is in trouble, and then we have Biden saying Britain is in trouble. So they are the globalists. They want open borders for everyone. Obviously, it is upsetting many people who hate it and don't see the point of it, because they preferred how life was when people knew who they were and who their neighbours were and could speak to them in a language that they all understood. So these things were never explained to ordinary people at all. They were just told to accept it. And I just don't think it's fair. It's not just Britain that's being upset. Because if you were to ask the EU, all the EU member states, to have a referendum on whether to leave or remain in the EU, I think you will find that all these member states would say, we want to leave. We're tired of this. And I
Yeah.
think perhaps Britain should be proposing the idea just to show the EU that it cannot forever be imposing its ridiculous rules on the rest of us, and it's not going to put up with it anymore. I mean, how dare Biden, who isn't president yet, tell the British what to do? And how dare Pelosi tell the British what to do? Is she Queen of America? Who the hell does she think she is?
Okay. Now, one country which is a major player now in the world is China. They have, manufacturing base, industrial base. They're trading with the world. How do you see yourself as a person of Chinese descent with Sino-British relations? Will there be more cooperation, or do you foresee enmity with China and between China and Britain?
Well, things are going to be a bit awkward for a while. I think this Huawei business was and America basically telling the British that they can't get Huawei to do their 5G is evidence of the control that the Americans have on trade and all their vassal states, of which Britain is one. So it does appear that the Americans are now terrified of China overtaking America, and that their instinct is to shoot China in the back if it possibly can, because they can't bear the idea of China ever overtaking them. And I have been following the exchanges and how the Chinese have been making what the Chinese have been making of this, and they're basically trying to advise America, saying, well, now that you've fallen behind us, you could perhaps reform your political system or your education system or whatever it is that you think needs to be reformed. Instead of throwing stones and bricks at us and accusing us of having stolen everything that we ever learned.
Okay, going back a bit to your past, did you have some sort of a religious persuasion as you were growing up? Were you raised as a Buddhist? What was the religious belief that you grew up with?
I was atheist for quite a while. I think I remember when I was about 11 thinking it would be nice to believe in God. I remember getting a book from a Jehovah's Witness, and there was this illustration of the lion lying beside the lamb or something like that, and I thought that seemed very nice. But then I thought and thought and thought about it, and I couldn't bring myself to believe in it. And then for a while I thought, well, Buddhism is an atheist philosophy. I was happy with that. And then came 9/11 and I read the Quran, I think about 2 years after that, and maybe more than that. And I thought, it's okay. I don't disagree with that. It seems quite reasonable. And a lot of the solutions that are being proposed in the Quran would actually were similar to what I thought would solve the problem in Britain. So that was when I became interested in the Quran as a book of rules.
And you are also very critical of Christianity. What experiences have you had with Christians, and what do you see as the basic flaw in Christian doctrine?
Well, from all the conversations that I have with Christians, I mean, they're being perfectly nice people, really, but they don't believe, and many of them don't even know that they're supposed to believe in the Trinity. They don't even know what it is that they are really supposed to believe in order to be Christian. So
Now,
it's very difficult talking to them because they think when they're afraid they can, go back to what they think are their Christian roots, but they don't even know their own history. They don't understand what, the doctrine of the Trinity. And the ones who accept it, who have been confirmed, they deny it's idolatry because, their answer was, well, if Christ is divine, then we're not being idolatrous. And I say, prove it. And they say, we don't have to. We can ignore you. Or words to that effect. So really, they don't care. They don't care that they're being idolatrous. And I would say, well, the Ten Commandments, they say, it forbids idolatry, and that Christ was convicted of blasphemy, and you worship a man convicted of blasphemy, and you think it's okay. And these arguments do not move them at all. They don't care.
And we also see you taking a very keen interest in Judaism. And I remember you mentioned you're taking some classes on Kabbalah. What's Kabbalah? What's Kabbalah? And it's becoming a buzzword in certain elite circles. Many celebrities are learning it. What is it? And what's it all about?
Well, the Kabbalah is really Jewish spiritual practice. So it's mystical and spiritual, basically. I know Madonna was into it when she was in London, and she went to the Kabbalah Center. But it is actually controversial because Orthodox Jews say that you can only properly benefit from Kabbalah if you're already Jewish. You can't just sort of go straight into it without any background in Judaism. So I believe there was some violence committed on the people who started the Kabbalah Center by other Jews who didn't think they should be passing on this knowledge to Gentiles. But I found it beneficial because it was. It's kind of life affirming, and it was interesting to see how they organize themselves.
Now, you write a lot about Jews to be practicing their religion, and you say that they aren't practicing their religion, but you want them to. You're also trying to contact and communicate with a number of rabbis. But at the same time, we see you posing in front of the Nazi flag. There are some pictures of you. You had a friend who had these World War II flags, and your pictures were there. Were you photographed by chance, or did you deliberately pose in front of a Nazi flag? What message were you trying to convey, and how do you reconcile that with your friendship with Jews?
Well, I can only tell you that when I saw those photographs, that of Dave Jones, he was the one who had those the flag and guns, and he was basically an ethno-nationalist who decided to be civic nationalist, and he wanted to be elected as councillor, and he asked me to visit a few times to give him more credibility because he had decided to be civic nationalist, and I was civic nationalist, but with very radical ideas. So this was what I did, and I thought I just had this compulsion to be photographed with these things because I saw it as a once in a lifetime opportunity to associate myself with nationalism, which I wanted to redefine as government in the national interest. So I didn't see nationalism as something necessarily racially based. You can just have government in the national interest, and I think most reasonable people would agree and say, yes, we want our government to govern in the national interest, so that all the sacrifices that we make for our government, it's worthwhile because it's for the whole of the country, the future of the country, blah blah blah. And I thought this was fair enough, and I guess doing that as a publicity stunt would, in a way, cement people's consciousness of me as somebody keen to promote nationalism and to redefine it away and rehabilitated away from the toxic ideas of Nazism and fascism and World War II and World War One and that kind of thing. And I was hoping to generate a dialogue and a debate, but it seemed that nobody's really interested in talking about these things. Certainly not the liberal media, who thought that I had condemned myself and that was game, set, and match for them. But fortunately, my Jewish friends have been more forgiving and understanding because they know that I don't really hate Jews.
Moving on to Islam, you are consistently calling for secular Quranism. How did you come about that, and what has been your experience with British Muslims? Have you interacted with them, and what was the response? How did it go about?
Well, secular Quranism is just another school of Sharia, as I interpret it. Since I call myself agnostic, I'm not at all surprised that these Muslims are very against the idea, probably calling it, secular Quranism illegitimate. But the thing is, it's an idea that could be discussed, but it seems that they're incapable of discussing it. So I thank you very much, Kashif, for being able to at least discuss this subject. The position of British Muslims seems to be that I'm not, I can't use this idea unless I'm Muslim. But if I became Muslim, I think I would lose my credibility with non-Muslim people, and non-Muslim British people are a bigger group than Muslim people. And also, these people have no religion, and I believe they need one. And if they can't bring themselves to believe in God, perhaps they can understand the mechanism by which a country or a group or a race manages to keep itself in existence and apart from others, while having an identity that is attractive and respectable. Because these people, these anti-Semites and Islamophobes, are always complaining about the people who have a religion. They're complaining about the Jews. They're always complaining about the Muslims, and they have no religion themselves. So, it's obvious what the problem is. They don't have a religion. They're not protected. Nobody respects them. Their government certainly despises them and easily, demonizes them and marginalizes them. So that is their problem.
But given that you haven't found much success, despite more than a decade of your preaching and promoting secular Quranism, don't you think that perhaps you need to have a change of direction? After all, how many people are there in the world who agree with your point of view of secular Quranism?
Well, the people I have been talking to have not given me a reason other than they hate Muslims, they hate Islam, and happily admitting that they are Islamophobes. So, as we all know, a phobia is an irrational hatred and fear of something. So they've actually said, yeah, I hate Islam, yeah, I hate Muslims, and that's it. And most of us are like that. And I'm still hoping to be able to discuss this with somebody who is educated and rational and able to come up with something more than I hate this.
But what success have you had since you've been working on this for more than a decade? One decade, and you haven't had any success. So how come you're, banging your head against the wall?
Well, I think things will have to get much worse before people will think, well, perhaps we need a religion because we obviously haven't got one. Because there is all civilizations have a religion, and all these religions do serve a certain purpose of maintaining a minimum standard of morality. And clearly, the West has gone below that minimum standard of morality and are promoting their moral sewage of globo homo all over the world. And I think Jews should feel a little guilty about letting this happen on their watch, because if Jews are anything, they are God's chosen people who were chosen to set standards and uphold them. And they can't even answer my question about which of the Gentile religions, there are only 4 that are most Noahide. If you look at the Jewish virtual library, they will say that Islam is, but they're not quite sure about Christianity. So I've been asking these rabbis to rank the 4 Gentile religions, and it seems that they are unable to, or unwilling to even accede to this simple request of mine. But
so you moved from atheism to agnosticism. Can you elaborate on that a bit? Why did you leave atheism and move towards a position of agnosticism?
Well, I'm trying to demonstrate that you don't have to believe in God to see certain advantages in social conservatism, because the whole point of all 5 world religions is that they all support marriage and family values. They all do, some better than others. I think Islam does it most effectively. And I think this minimum standard of morality would be to ensure that most parents in your society are married parents. And this is obviously not the case in the West. The illegitimacy rate is 40% in America. It's 50% in Canada, over 50% in the UK, over 50% in Norway. So it's getting pretty bad. And I'm saying this is the purpose of religion. And all secular political ideologies deviate from the gold standard of marriage. And that's why they all don't last as long as religion.
But doesn't Islam promote marriage? In fact, a man can marry up to 4 wives if he treats them equally. Why not Islam?
I am saying that the legal system of Britain should be based on the Quran. So I do already say that. So
But
obviously, if you can afford to
say it is based on the Quran, what would be the motivation for a person to act on it? For Muslims, that motivation is the hereafter, life after death. Muslims believe that life is short and you have to act on the Quranic guidance in order to be successful in the hereafter. But for somebody who does not believe in the hereafter, who does not believe in God, why should he act on Quranic guidance? What's the motivation for him?
I think there are benefits to living in a stable society with low crime, fewer laws, and no taxes, which I think people would get when they were following God's laws more.
But the Quran gives a tax. The Quran imposes a mandatory zakat on the believers. The believers have to give that. So how can you say there are no taxes if Islamic law is followed?
Oh, I didn't say there were no taxes. I was saying lower taxes.
Lower taxes.
Yes.
Right.
I think it's 20%, a flat. I interpret cums to be a flat rate income tax of 20%, which I think would be attractive both to the wealthy and the aspiring.
Right. Okay, so are you serious when you speak about the Quran? And you've been writing about it since many years, which shows that it isn't just something you do by way of jest.
Oh, yes, of course.
What has inspired you towards the Quran? What do you find inspiring when you read the book?
Well, the rules make a lot of sense. Even the inheritance rules make sense, because it's the idea of not concentrating wealth into particular families. And so if you have fewer less income disparities, you would have a more cohesive society because you won't create, hatred between the haves and the have-nots. You would create greater gender justice. You would produce more marriageable men and more marriageable women because they would be forbidden from fornication, and they would be prevented from distracting them from producing illegitimate offspring, which tend to become underachievers and criminals of the next generation.
So,
So
who,
law and order reasons would be.
okay, you cite the law. Then what about the lawgiver? Who gave these laws? Are these laws man-made? Did Prophet Muhammad make them up? Where did these laws come from?
I know Muslims believe that they that the words of the Quran are the directly revealed word of God.
And what is your belief?
I suppose it is possible for a committee of very learned people to get together and compose a Quran. A committee of poets with a political agenda. But since I am agnostic, I have to acknowledge the possibility it might be God Himself.
So, okay, but you also mentioned the possibility of a committee of writers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And at the same time, you also entertain the idea that it is God's word. Okay, let's say if it was a committee, it follows from this that, this is an idea, a supposition. What is the proof that a number of writers wrote the Quran?
There is no proof at all. I have no. I suppose people who say, "Oh, Muhammad wrote it," and then when they're told, "Oh, he couldn't possibly have written it because he didn't have the education," then they could say, "Well, some poet, or maybe a number of poets, did it." So I'm just speculating. But it's easier to believe that it came from God, and then the Quran would have a greater authority and be more attractive to people, so more adopted.
How do you see the concept of God that the Quran has given in comparison with the concept of God prevailing in other religions, Judaism or Christianity, for example?
Well, I think it's necessary to have the idea of God as a supreme, the supreme authority. I don't know if you've heard of the mandate of heaven, but it's an ancient Chinese idea that is supposed to check the emperor of China, to kind of warn him that he must not abuse his power, or the mandate of heaven might be withdrawn.
Yes, but do you think that the concept of God, which the Quran has given, like God does not beget, He is not begotten, there is nothing similar to Him, nothing is similar to God. Do you think these ideas about God, they exist in Christianity or Judaism as well?
I think the 13 principles of Judaism certainly are very similar to the Muslim idea of God, that he is, immaterial. He
But,
created the universe.
but isn't God called the Father in Judaism?
Yes, but I suppose they have to in some way personify him. So there's always this difficulty, on the one hand, wanting to say God is like nothing you can ever imagine, and then then you somehow have this idea of he's like Papa. But then I think I seem to remember a verse in the Quran that says God, Allah is your friend, or something similar like that. So I think people can't help it. They want God to be, both unimaginable yet comforting. So it's a combination of the two, I suppose.
So, as an agnostic, what is a barrier between you becoming a believer in God? why are you hesitant? What is your criticism?
None at all. I'm trying to. I'm operating in a society that is overwhelmingly atheist and Islamophobic. So I don't think I will become more persuasive to this
So
larger group if I became Muslim anyway.
so
And
the barrier between you becoming a believer in God is basically the pressures from society. Am I correct to understand that that is the main reason?
well, I'm trying to say that my becoming Muslim would not help me sell secular Quranism to these Islamophobes. So I'm trying to, what I'm trying to do is to tell people that it is possible to see the purpose of religion, to see that Christianity has failed, and to see that there's nothing else to choose if they want to replace Christianity, which has failed, with
But
this
has
replacement.
has being an agnostic helped you in selling secular Quranism for more than a decade? After all, you've been doing this for a decade, but you're still a one-man band or a one-woman band. So how has being an agnostic helped you in selling this idea?
Well, it has helped me. I think a lot of people are aware of that idea, and I think they are
But you
conspiring.
don't have a single convert. You don't have a single follower.
I do have one. I had
Okay.
two. I had two, but I now have
So
one.
one in 10 years. All
But
right.
you see, I think you need to understand that a lot of people have not said that they don't want it because it wouldn't work. They're saying they don't want it because they hate it. And Alex Woodrow, my only named supporter, has provisionally said, well, he can't think of anything else that might work because there's nothing else around that could work. You know, that is holistic enough to do everything to make it work. So as long as there's no other better idea, he would still be a secular Quranist. But this is what the difficulty of how people, of the people who actually are happy to just ignore all the arguments. Because if I talk to people, they'll say, "Yeah, Christianity is kaput. We don't even believe in Christianity anyway, and they think it's stupid, and they think all religion is stupid." So and I can't actually talk to anybody with any education or who is a public intellectual because they all happen to be Christian and they don't want to be told that Christianity is kaput. So I'm operating in a swamp of cowardice and hypocrisy, and people who are actually denying that their society is going down the toilet. But we'll see after the American elections, because we're seeing what's happening in the West now, aren't we? And sooner or later they'll be thinking, well, perhaps we do need a religion because nothing else would work. And also, the abolition of usury would allow governments and individuals to default on their debts. So that there are all kinds of practical benefits to adopting secular Quranism, I would say.
Okay. What has been your experience in engaging with the Islamic scholar from Cambridge, Hakim Abdul Murad?
I haven't properly engaged with him in the sense that he seems more interested in the esoteric side of. No, that's not fair. He does talk about politics, but he doesn't want to make political statements, and I understand. I understand, because people don't want to lose their position, they don't want to lose their job. He was actually invited to present Thought for the Day on the Today programme on Radio 4 until it was decided that he was too right-wing, and they invited Mona Siddiqui instead, and she is a feminist, and she will, I think many Muslims will agree that she has watered down and diluted a lot of Islamic principles and gone along with the liberal agenda. So people
Yes, I
get
know.
sensitive, they get frightened.
I know Mona Siddiqui. I once was in a conference with her, and the traditional Muslim community does not hold her into high standing. She has some views which traditional Islamic scholars are not, receptive to. So, so are you willing to engage with the Muslims at a theological level, have a dialogue with them, like you're having a dialogue with me? Are there any other local Muslims in London, for example, with whom you have face-to-face contact? There is a debate, I understand, that happens at Hyde Park in London at Speaker's Corner every Sunday, and I believe that Muslims of a number of denominations would have open debates with people of other faiths. So, have you had an opportunity to visit Hyde Park, Speaker's Corner?
I actually have been a speaker at Speaker's Corner, and I have encountered these Muslims. And there was a time when they were still allowed to pray in public, and then there was a law against that. But yeah, Muhammad Hijab and people like him would go and preach there. I know, but I didn't bump into him when I was there. Um, it can be useful, I suppose, but to practice your oratorical skills, and it can be quite fun. But actually, I don't see any point in talking to most Muslims, because I can predict what they're going to say to me. They'll say I have no right to promote my school of Sharia because I'm not even Muslim, and I'm saying that. Well, I'll be saying that I don't need their permission, and I'm trying to sell it to the political establishment, because obviously they would be the one to implement it, and I know they're not quite ready yet, because they're not quite ready to admit the failure of Christianity and liberalism, even though Putin last year declared liberalism obsolete, and they haven't been able to have a proper discussion about it. And the thing about liberalism and Christianity is that you can get all these liberals and get all these Christians and ask them what principles of Christianity or liberalism can you agree on, and they wouldn't be able to agree on it. And the beauty of Islam is that these Muslims will say, well, whatever's in the Quran, those are our principles, they might say, or even Jews and say whatever's in the Torah, well, we have to agree that it's a word of God, but certainly not Christians or liberals. They don't have an official handbook, and who knows what a Christian is anymore, or what they're supposed to believe. I think a Christian these days is a liberal who expects to go to heaven without even knowing the idea of sin. They think it was the Pope who said that everyone has a reasonable chance of going to heaven. That was what the Pope said. I don't know if you knew that.
But the Quran is very clear. It does define who goes to heaven according to what beliefs and what practices, and who does not go to heaven, rather ends up in hell. So, aren't you concerned about hell as a sojourn for the afterlife?
Well, I think it's more important that I sell secular Quranism, and I know that becoming Muslim would actually retard the process of it, because then all these Muslims will say to me, shut up, you can't come to our mosque anymore if you continue promoting secular Quranism. So I don't want to be put in that position. So that's one of the reasons I don't want to be, somehow put in a position of.
But there have been many examples whereby Quranic principles were presented as a political tool without the language of the Quran, in a secular language. To give you an example, during the life of Prophet Muhammad himself, peace be upon him, there was the Charter of Medina. Have you heard of the Charter of Medina? Which was an agreement between the Muslims and the Jews and other tribes on acceptable behavior, and it was based on Quranic law, but the wording was secular. Do you know that?
No, please tell me more.
Okay, well, if you can read up on the Charter of Medina, it
Mhm.
was an agreement entered into by the Prophet and the people of Medina, which included a large number of Jews as well.
Mhm.
So, well, we have a visitor. There is somebody here. Let me just flag up his comment. It's John 5 or John capital V. Works and faith lined up in the Quran and the Bible are clearly outlined. The works are very similar. The only difference would be the faith when it comes to belief in Trinity and different prophets. Well, John, let me make it clear to you that this is not the case across all Christian denominations. There are some Christian denominations that say that your salvation is only by faith. And they quote St. Paul, who said that your works are like filthy rags, your works are of no use. You are given salvation only if you believe in the blood of Jesus. This is the position of a lot of evangelical Christian denominations. Uh, there are some denominations that include faith as well as works, like the Catholics, for example. So, your comment is true for a few, but not all. So, it's important that we give a balanced point of view. Uh, Claire, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, I know that the Quran guarantees freedom of belief with chapter 2, verse 256. So obviously, people will think privately what they think and believe what they want to believe. But as long as they follow the laws, we will have a reasonably stable society. So I think that the Quran was, originally it was always envisaged that Sharia would be applied, in a diverse society, taking into account people who are not Muslims and accommodating them.
Yes, well, there is no compulsion in religion, chapter number 2, verse number 256 is very clear in the Quran that believers are not to force people to join Islam. And they are given this rule by God Almighty. That is the belief that it's the will of God that people coexist peacefully, and there is no forced conversion.
Did
So,
you know that was the basis of the First Amendment? I don't know if you know that Thomas Jefferson did read the Quran. There is a White House copy of the Quran.
yes, as I was saying, that there are many examples whereby secular laws are made by looking at Quranic principles. But my contention is that those laws will not work if God and the hereafter are removed from the equation, because the central motivation for action in the Quran is belief in God, that God is the supreme being to whom we are accountable, and God is our creator, and He is the one who gives life, He is the one who gives death, and we believe in God and we believe in the hereafter. We want a better hereafter than our present. That is why we put the laws of God into action. The laws of God are not to make this world into a very beautiful place only. This world is a place of test. The central teaching of the Quran is that this world is a place of test. There is pain here, there is suffering here, there is turmoil here, and this will continue. New people will come, old people will die, humanity will continue, and all this. It's not the case that one day the entire planet will be hunky dory. That is not the case. This world is a place of test, and the real place of to be is the hereafter. So Quranic laws are put into practice by the believer who believes that there is a creator and who believes in accountability after life. Now, if you remove belief from a creator, if you remove accountability, then what are you left with
I'm
except
not
the
removing it. It's optional. It's optional because
no?
are you really expecting people to all convert to Islam before this? I mean, surely even when the Prophet Muhammad entered Mecca and had his Islamic revolution, not everybody agreed at the time. But obviously, the fact that they weren't persecuted made it tolerable, and they didn't, rebel against him. They thought, well, it seems fair enough. We can still do, do whatever. It's not too unfair. But if you wait until these Westerners become Muslim, I mean, you might as well be waiting for hell to freeze over, and surely. If you can shorten suffering, why not propose it? And also, once the laws of God are in place, belief will follow. Because what will happen? It will happen in only 2 generations. Now, I'll tell you how. Okay, let's see. Let's imagine, two atheist men and man and a woman, and they marry, and they don't believe in God, but they have to live in this Islamic state. They're not very happy about it, and then they have children. And if they have children, they will be using God to frighten their children into good behavior. And these children, they'll be doing the same thing to their children. So I'm saying 2 or 3 generations, and most people will be Muslim. But, first you have to have the idea. Trying to convert everyone will just be too much of an uphill task.
Well, Claire, look, in capitalism, the motivation to work is profit, right? Every person pursues his personal interest and he is motivated to action by profit. In communism, the motivation to work is the state. The state forces you to work. You all get equal pay, but again, if you don't work, then you get the stick. So it's the carrot or the stick that is the motivation.
Mm-hmm.
For somebody to put into practice Quranic law, the hereafter, life after death is the motivation. Accountability before God is the motivation. There are many examples of basic human rights being in the Quran. There are some people have written that the Charter of United Nations, which outlines the human right, the right to life, the right to education, the right to marriage, the right to travel, the right to, freedom of religion, the right to assembly, all these are Quranic rights. But what is the motivation to act on them? Why should I act on these rights? If there is going to be no accountability in afterlife, why shouldn't I try and become so powerful that I'm above the law and I live luxuriously and live a hedonistic lifestyle, and I also commit murder and oppression? There's nothing on the other side to catch me, such people will say. You see, so there is a need to believe in the afterlife and in God for righteous action. We do righteous acts for our own benefit. It benefits us, it benefits the society. But this society is not that all there is. There is also going to be a life after death. Belief in life after death is central to Islam. So my question to you again is that, as an agnostic, are you willing to look into belief in God and belief in afterlife? Is that something you are looking to pursue?
Of course. I mean, people really want to believe in what they want to believe, and sometimes, it's a lifestyle choice. So, say you're gay. I mean, there's no point believing in God because you'll be, convinced that you go to hell. So people, in a way, choose what they instinctively prefer, and then they will find an ideology to justify their choice. So, if you live in the West and you grown up thinking you have a right to have sex outside of marriage, that it is your God-given, well, a liberal given right to have sex outside marriage, and you're used to it and you like it that way, then you will remain an atheist, because otherwise you would be upset, would be looking over your shoulder the whole time, thinking, "Oh, God will condemn me for doing this and doing that." And obviously, if you want to be a married parent and you want to, you know, bring up your children properly and have family and a stable, then you will want to believe in God because you support these rules. And if you support these rules, you want to believe in God because that would, reaffirm your your intention to follow these laws. So I think people will in the end fall into place. So okay, you say, "Oh, you have to do this now because that's a law," and people will go unwillingly. And maybe if they try for a bit, they'll find that maybe they enjoy the stable currency, the stable economy, the stable society, the lower crime, the lower taxes. Maybe they will like that, and then they think, "Oh, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I want to believe in it after all." And death is scary, and it's nice to believe in an afterlife where we can go and meet all our loved ones afterwards. People do already want to believe in these things, and of course, the Islamic heaven is a very consumerist heaven. It is the most appealing kind of heaven, I think, that I have ever read.
Claire, I'm quoting a Quranic verse, chapter number 2, verse number 27. It says, "How can you reject the faith in Allah, in God, seeing that ye were without life, and He gave you life? Then will He cause you to die, and will again bring you to life, and again to Him will ye return." This is the Quran, chapter number 2, verse number 27. Now, it begs the question, before we move on to following moral laws, that there is a lawgiver who brought everything into being. We were without life. We didn't exist. We were brought into being. We came into existence, and it's a fact that we are not immortal. And one day we are going to die. So, who is causing all that? Isn't that a question that has bothered you?
Well, I sort of half know the answer, because there is one answer that it is God, and or some people will say something else. But it's easier to believe in God because of the easy logic of it. So we have one being who is responsible for everything in the universe that we can pray to from time to time. It's sort of logical. It's therapeutic. It's
If it's logical, it's therapeutic to believe in an intelligent creator, a supreme creator, then what is preventing you from believing in that?
Because I really feel I have to sell secular Quranism through the use of reason alone.
But you have been very
I want to emphasize the lifetime advantages of living in a stable society.
Do you think you have the time at your disposal to sell secular Quranism? Is that what you want to do all your life?
Yeah, because I'm convinced that it is the answer. I mean, it's the best available answer to all the social and political problems of the West, isn't it?
What about your own?
I don't know of any other, and the reason that is not being discussed are social, moral, and political. No public intellectual will engage with me because they are frightened of losing the argument. I'm saying, you can win the argument on just reason alone. I don't have to convince anyone to believe in God at all.
What if there is a God, and there is a hell, and there is a paradise, and there is an afterlife? And those who don't believe in God end up in hellfire. What if that is true? Then do you think it's a wise thing to be a disbeliever?
Well, it's safer to be a believer, but because I am doing what I have to do, I think the advantage of it is that um, maybe my dawa will reach out to more people than merely myself becoming Muslim, and then people will be saying, "Oh, I'm just a religious fanatic," trying to foist Sharia on them. I
But
think it's important that people understand that I'm not Muslim, and that they um, can see
it,
the appeal of it.
Claire, from your conversation, I gather that you are very concerned about what people will say about you. But aren't these people very short lived, and they are also going to bite the dust very soon?
Yes,
Why are you worried so much about uh, people who have a very temporary lifespan and who won't be here in a couple of years? Why are you so concerned about pleasing them? Shouldn't you be concerned about pleasing a god if he exists?
I'm not so much concerned about pleasing these Islamophobes. I really, I guess I'm just invested in my idea that it is uh, the adequate and the correct solution, and I really want somebody who could be said to be educated and honourable to say why it wouldn't work, and why Britain doesn't need a religion, and why they think Christianity is still working. I want them to answer these questions first, and I don't think my converting to Islam is going to give me any credibility. Well, perhaps they can take it this way, that I am sacrificing the possibility of an afterlife just to make them take notice of my proposed solution. So the least they can do is find somebody who is a respected public intellectual to consider my idea, rather than having to be forced to talk to low grade, low status people who think it is enough to say we hate it because we hate Muslims and Islam. I just
But
want for the next stage for there to be somebody prepared to consider my proposal in an educated and impartial way.
but the people that you want to save, they looks like they're a perished nation anyway. Why are you trying to save those who are bound to perish?
Well, are you saying that Britain could never be Muslim? Is that what you're saying?
No, but you're not trying to make them Muslim. You're trying to convert them to secular Quranism, and your logic is that you want to save them from the perils of, liberalism or feminism or whatever. But looks like British society is in a downfall, and Britain is likely to break up into many pieces. And there is already, turmoil. There is economic uh, trouble heading its way. So if the boat is sinking, why do you want to put patches in it when it's going to sink anyway?
Well, I think I feel, in a way, like a messenger who has yet to deliver her message. I arrive at the house, the lights are on, but there's only the dog barking and, dirty, neglected children. I'm just waiting for a responsible adult to open the door to me and sign the document that it has been received. That's all I'm waiting for. I think if I have been, if God exists and I have been put on earth to do this thing, I will have to, you know, wait for all the things I have to wait for to happen. So far, unfortunately, there is no public intellectual capable of addressing the issue that I raise. So I think that in theory, there's still a possibility that somebody might say, well, Maybe we have to admit that Christianity is no longer operational. Maybe since Putin has said liberalism is obsolete, we have to admit the failure of liberalism. And maybe after the collapse of, I don't know, starvation or whatever that the EU or Biden presidency imposes on Britain, they might be closer to accepting secular Quranism. Or even Islam.
John is of the view that Claire is turning into one of those theological scholars that know everything but don't actually do anything except preach to the choir. Would you agree to that, Claire?
I don't have a choir to preach to, and John V used to be a secular Quranist. He and I used to have an association, though he has blocked me, so I can't see his comments in the chat.
He also says that your foundation is nothing but quicksand. Now, this is somebody who you say was with you. Now, if people, your own flock, are running away from you, then, you know.
Well, I hardly have a flock. I hardly have a flock. But John Vance has converted to Islam. So, and he has more or less told me that his new Muslim community don't like secular Quranism and have basically told him to distance himself from me. And so I have no idea what he thinks he is doing now, but that will be his problem.
Okay, Claire, it was very interesting to talk to you. We're way past the hour. I hope we can resume our dialogue some other time.
That would be a pleasure.
Is there anything you would like to say? Last words?
I can't think of anything offhand, except that, perhaps it can be understood that I do want to deliver my message properly, and, all these sort of low-grade, low-status people that come to my channel are just not enough. But I have to persist until perhaps somebody who is a public intellectual will at least consider it. But I suspect the corrupt media are not going to publicize my idea, but in fact suppress it and ignore it, because the West is in such a bad state that none of the important institutions are fit for purpose, including the media, who are supposed to facilitate discussion and debate.
Thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you very much, Kashif, for hearing out. I'm very grateful.
I was talking to Claire Khaw, who has been in touch with me since a very long time. She interacts with me on my YouTube channel. She's been a speaker a number of times. She's taking a keen interest in Islam. She has some ideas, and which does have its critics, but we are having a very interesting conversation and dialogue. So that was Claire Khaw from London live, and we're now coming to the end of the program. I will be live again, inshallah, God willing, about 10 hours from now. I'll be talking to Mr. Bashir Shah, who is an American Muslim, hopefully in 10 hours from now. Do join me then if you can. Thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.